Hi, I'm Dr. Ray Middleton, and in this short film, I'm just hoping to explain a few of Mikhail Bakhtin's key ideas or concepts. So, for example, to illustrate a few of these ideas or concepts, imagine you or I had a friend and they said to us, I'm worried about paying my bills. I'm living with a mental illness. I'm not making this up. A doctor diagnosed me with generalized anxiety disorder, so I should take my tablets, I guess. So that's a kind of typical phrase that somebody might use or say, a friend, family member, or someone you're working with. And I'm going to analyze that phrase using some of the concepts in order to kind of make sense of or illustrate the concepts or ideas. I'm hoping this is helpful. So for Mikhail Bakhtin, a key idea is that of the utterance. Now, an utterance, whether it's typed up and written or whether it's in speech genres, is a phrase that could be a single word, it could be a few sentences or a paragraph, but it's a phrase that makes sense in itself and is expecting some kind of dialogue or response from the reader or the listener. So in this phrase, your friend said, they expect some kind of response from you, and so we can take this as an utterance, and we can identify key phrases or utterances like this and analyze them. So if we analyze this phrase, we could think about Bakhtin's key idea about genre. Now, all a genre is a general set of expectations about what kind of things and how you're going to say something. So in typed genres would be things like novels have different kinds of genres, or films have genres, like science fiction films is a kind of genre. It's just a general set of expectations. And then the speech genres, a whole set of them, and the primary genre is everyday ordinary life when we're talking about things. So the start of this utterance, I'm worried about paying my bills, is a primary genre of ordinary language and how we speak about things. And we can identify a secondary genre, and we can do this with any utterance. We can, here, the secondary genre is the one from biomedical model of mental health, because your friend is using phrases like mental illness and a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder, and they're also talking about taking medication. So there's a blend, a hybrid here of primary, everyday ordinary language and secondary professional language and genres mixed together, and that'd be a hybrid. And so we're starting to identify what are the major genres in this phrase, and that's a start for analysing it. Professional genres, there's all sorts of them, but here we're thinking about the biomedical model of mental health. The biomedical model would be seen as a monological discourse by Bakhtin, or through this lens. Now, a monological discourse is one that claims to be the authority speaking about its subject, here mental health, and it tends not to like and to resist alternative viewpoints. It tends to want to monopolize, like the game of Monopoly. It tends to want to monopolize the subject, and they're usually promoted by people in authority figures like a doctor in the case of a diagnosis of mental health, and they're generated elsewhere. Like there's a book like the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, DSM-5, or the ICD, International Classification of Diseases, would have a list of these diagnoses. So you see the genres are actually typed up and written up and generated in other places, and then they're promoted. So in this utterance or phrase that your friends said to you, we've identified the everyday ordinary primary genres of everyday speech and some of these monological professional genres of the biomedical model in this instance. And what we can do is see that there's a hybrid conversation going on where, and this happens all the time, it's completely normal that we have a hybrid conversation between some professional genres and some ordinary everyday genres, primary and secondary ones, mixed together. To the degree to which your friend believes this, they then try to speak it out and say, I've got generalized anxiety disorder. We can see that. And another word for that monological discourse would be an authoritative discourse, one that's promoted in our culture and society as one with authority and power. So it's a powerful, you could call it an ideology or a powerful set of ideas. So that authoritative discourse, when we believe it, like your friend does here, it's called becoming internally persuasive. So that just means that we've taken inside of ourselves something that we didn't generate. Your friend didn't generate this idea on their own, did they? It was outside of them, and now they've internalized it, having got a diagnosis, and they're then speaking it out. And to some degree, they believe it. But quite often, we don't believe things 100%. We might believe them 20%, 80%, 50%. And so we can start to analyze the dialogue in the phrases people say. So a dialogical sense of self or identity would say that we're always internally persuading ourselves and believing some things, ideas and narratives about us that are generated outside of ourselves, taking authoritative discourses, and they become internally persuasive. And at the same time, we're also doubting some of these things we believe about ourselves, and we're pushing them out of ourselves. So there's a constant state of consciousness around pulling into ourselves new ideas that we believe and pushing out of ourselves, doubting and disbelieving old ideas about ourselves. And that's a normal process that's going on. So when we say things about ourselves and the world that we believe to some degree, we often have a small degree of doubt about it as well. And so when your friend says, I'm not making this up, about them having this diagnosis in that phrase, this could be identified using the concept from Mikhail Bakhtin of a word with a sideward glance. Now, what does that mean? It means that when your friend says, I'm living with a mental illness, I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, they are always anticipating, as we all do, the response of your response and the response generally in society from other points of view. And so as they try to say this, the idea comes into them of people will think I'm making this up. And so they speak out against that voice and say the phrase, I'm not making this up. So that's a word with a sideward glance, which means any time that we speak something and we speak against a criticism or a judgment of our belief or our statement that we imagine out there, that is a sideward glance looking at those other voices that might try to impede, get inside us, wedge inside us. So that's another concept, a word with a sideward glance. And it's possible to analyse, using this conceptual framework, utterances and identify not only the different primary and secondary genres, but also the words with a sideward glance. And there's another concept, which is a word with a loophole. And that is when we don't quite 100% believe what we're saying about ourselves or the society or the world we live in. And so we give ourselves a way out, a loophole. So when your friend says, I should take my medication, I guess, that's a loophole. It gives them an ability to then change their mind maybe later on, or identify that they may be not 100% aligned with a position statement that they've just said. And so that's a word with a loophole. And we do this lots, and you can identify these in conversations and phrases and utterances that people make, is to spot the words with a loophole, which is suggesting I don't want to 100% forever permanently commit myself to this position. I'm going to give myself a little bit of wriggle room to get out and change my mind later. So to sum up, a dialogical narrative analysis using some of these concepts from Bakhtin could say that our identities are made up of a hybrid of different narratives. And some are authoritative narratives or secondary genres that we've internally persuaded ourselves that we believe to some degree, but we might have some degree of doubt. And we're always either pushing out some ideas or narratives about ourselves and our society that we don't believe anymore, pushing them out, and we're taking into ourselves these authoritative narratives that we then believe to some degree. And this is a dynamic process. But as we speak out what we believe, it's in the context of lots of other powerful ideas. And so we might speak with a word with a sideward glance to kind of push back against criticisms, judgments that we might perceive and imagine that are trying to come in. And we also might have these words with a loophole, which gives us a bit of degree of flexibility or a way out, a bit of wriggle room to say, well, actually, I may not believe this in the future, but now I believe it. Like the phrase, I guess. I hope you found this helpful. Write a comment if you'd like to hear a bit more about Bakhtin's concepts. or anything you think about this video. Thank you.